Thank you for coming back to my webcomic production series. Today, I'll be modeling and texturing my main character, X-Factor. I begin by taking one of my base models and duplicating it for two folders to make the original design from my already published chapters and the new model. It's been 5 years since I last uploaded a new chapter, and I've gained a new perspective on where to take the story, and I think a new suit could help me bring home the change. Marcus is not a teenager anymore. Life has caught up to him, and if he thought his actions had consequences, he's about to find out how big this can be. Once I have my models, I go to edit mode and start selecting the faces of the eyes. They are the way through which the X-Factor can express himself, and they need to be outlined properly. After that, I just make a base cutout of the shapes I need to unwrap. I saw an image on the internet that said to think of unwrapping a mesh as making a pattern for clothes, and that's the logic I'm applying. I know it sounds weird for faces and hands, but this is a suit, so we shouldn't be so far off. Like I said, this process is pretty straightforward. The X-Factor has long gloves and high boots, and his pants are built like normal pants, so it's really quick. Once I'm done, I add the extra geometry I need for his equipment. I summon a circle and turn it into a cylinder, located on his lower back. The cylinder is a container of the rope connected to his grappling hook, and as you can tell by reading the comic, I based the X-Factor on Spider-Man, but with the concept of kick-ass. So he had to make do with his intellect and as basic materials as he could find to get closer to Spider-Man. I go to the waist and extrude the utility belt, something which Spider-Man also has, but doesn't really show. The utility of his belt is to keep his phone, keys, wallet, and some other gadgets he may need in the future, like his glue trap gun from chapter 27. I like the idea of having more gadgets in the future, but I have trouble thinking of something that could be valuable enough to carry daily and that doesn't sound like a deus ex machina, but I'm working on more concepts for the future. Once I extrude the pouches for the belt, I spend a decent time adjusting them to look good and move on to the grappling hooks. The grappling hooks will be added on post, so I don't have to deal with clipping and disappearing the mesh every time he swings over the city. As I add the grappling hooks, I realize that I need to go back and mark the seams for the new elements I've been adding, so I can paint them later on the video. I'm currently marking the seams for the fingers. The way I do it is by cutting the fingers off from the hand. This way I have a simple rectangular-ish shape and many linear shapes for the fingers that you could align together and have two overall fingers, one for the thumbs and the other for the remaining fingers, although I've never done this myself. Anyways, I cut the fingers in two parts so that I can make the process easier. This also works for my design since the fingers on the X-Factor gloves are red and the hand is a yellowish beige tone. I move on to the feet where I separate them as if they were short socks. Then I cut the sock in three parts, the base of the foot and the two sides of the sock, just because that's the easiest way for me to split up the organic shape of the foot. I remember that my belt pouches look more like hanging squares and swoosh back to fix it with more geometry. I hide everything except for the belt and go around trying to smooth it out and get it to feel more like a belt. You know, let the OCD win and also just saving me some time in the future. And here comes the toughest part, the UV unwrapping. So yeah, there's no real way to sugarcoat this for anyone. If I were to put the workflow in levels of difficulty, it would go building the armature at number 1, texture painting at 2, customizing the shader at 3, modeling at 4, weight painting at 5, and UV unwrapping at 6. 6 being the hardest level, obviously. It may not be the same for you, but for me, I have to deal with these weird meshes and the blender wrapping itself. One rule I have is to smooth the unwrapped mesh so I don't have issues later on, but that's like the final boss of unwrapping the meshes, and as you can see, I have a lot of them. I need to isolate them into groups so I can take the basically identical meshes and overlap them, making them share the same texture. Yes, but also, it's just a pouch. It doesn't need to be that complex. And also, it saves space in the overall texture, so instead of just having 8 pouch textures at very small sizes, we have 2 at a decently small size with good texture quality. So yeah, I also let the OCD win and push for the smoothing now. I mean, it does feel easier this way to have one neat texture to move around instead of a jumbled monster, but yeah, this is going to take a while. Anyways, if you've been wondering why he's called the X-Factor like a TV show, I'm going to be real with you. It's not because of the equation thing in the first chapters. Truth be told, I had been designing a lot of characters with the same emblem before doing this comic. They all had huge X's or crosses on the chest and face. Later on, they began having it on their arms and legs, and there are 2 reasons for this. Number 1, the huge X on one of Cyclops' suits looks very cool. Like, honestly, tell me that's not the leader of the X-Men. The very idea, I mean, great choice. And 2, around that time, I was going through a downer period. In my country, we have this expression that goes X, which literally means the letter X, but, and let me defend this, the way it's used is to dismiss stuff. You say something is X, someone is X, and you just dismiss it, and since I was kind of in my bigger, loner times back then, I just began considering myself X or X, and when I saw Cyclops in the suit, I just clicked with it. The mutants are outcasts, and they still try to be good and better. I felt like an outcast and I felt labeled, so I just decided to take that label and spin it around, make it my own, and I began using the X symbol, maybe a bit too much, but it just worked for me. When I had the idea to make a superhero that was newish in huge quotes, I just thought that maybe his symbol could be the one I was using, and so the X Factor was born. Then I just made up the line of the equation just to avoid convoluting the dialogue in the comic and maybe sound heroic. And I know it's a little weird of an answer to give people when getting asked, hey, why do you have a giant X on your chest and face? But I mean, if DC has the anti-life equation and the life equation, I can have this, you know? Anyways, here I tried to smooth out the shared and mask parts, and they don't work. So I just let them be. At least they won't deform as poorly as I feared. Then I select all of the unwrapped meshes and place them on the texture plane with enough hierarchy to make it work. Don't worry about the eye textures. I have a simpler plan for working on this, I promise. Now, I move into the texture painting. I usually do it on Medibank Paint. It's a free software that I've been using for making all of my comics and illustrations. And I also usually record everything I do there, but this time I just forgot. So sorry about that. But the real process begins once I port to Blender anyways. I take a basic texture setup to get the texture imported and adjust it to try and make it more of a cartoon-like style. I fail, and I just decide to address the elephant in the room. My texture is warped, especially on the X parts, which is to be expected since I have no true way of knowing unless I had decided to paint some base texture early on, which means it's fixing time. I tried to adjust the mesh on the texture view to get it to match, but this obviously warps the texture more, and clearly doesn't work, which is why I decided to just paint over it. I was avoiding this since I feel like I always have trouble when doing this, but I had to give it a shot. I also go into the render options and adjust the colors so we can see the true colors I added, instead of a filmic interpretation of it. I mean, it's supposed to be a colorful comic, so just give me my hues. So I begin painting and erasing and fitting the OCD, just because I always have issues with the brush, but I certainly fix it and commit to the process. I do some very basic shape outlining that I will fix later on, and I really mean fix, like I fix everything. For now, I can talk more about how I designed X Factor. I wanted to have the giant red X, but didn't know what color to make the rest. I didn't want to go for a light blue like almost every other superhero, and mid-process I came across an old jacket in my house that was from a football team. It has these weird yellowish beige and red accents, and I liked it. I didn't like the design, but I thought I could make the colors work on the X Factor, so I just took the color scheme and never looked back, until the redesign in this process, obviously. But we'll have time to talk about this later. Here, I'm cleaning the eyes and realizing that I don't need to have the outlines on the red to have it look good, so I just drop it and start redesigning the style more and more. I add some basic shadows on places where the light wouldn't naturally reach, and yes, this can come back and challenge me in the future, but I like the idea since the Persona games do this and it seems to work just fine, so I'ma keep it. I fine-tune the shadows, battle with what I already had painted, annoyed that it would have been faster in Medibank with layers, and realize it wasn't that hard, and just move on, stronger than before. I adjust the shadows and colors in the hand and shade the grappling hooks. Then I start adding the highlights to seal the entire texture. Then I commit more to the no more black outlines on textures, because let's face it, it was not going to work. I shade the pouches and the area beneath the belt, make a sole for the shoe, shade the rope containers, the eyes, and then have the most fun I can by adding the highlights over the entire body. I shade it so good for my skill level that I'm genuinely surprised. It looks pretty good, but here comes the fun part. I found the shader I wanted to use and implement it, and I mean, just take a look at the before and after. It truly is amazing, just wonderful. I'm pretty satisfied, so much so that I just start posting character around and it works perfectly, for me at least. And that was today's video. I'm really happy to have revisited this process, and hopefully you enjoyed it as well. Let me know your thoughts in the comments, like, subscribe, and ring the bell so you stay in touch for the next videos on this series. Check my Instagram if you want more different short form content, and I'll be seeing you around, pals.